Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the BFG Podcast. Today I am here with children author Peter Millett, who, who has written lots of children's books about Anzac biscuits and dinosaurs and among many other things. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Blake. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So you got into work with or have books read or got to know people like Reese Darby and Susie Cato. So how is that for you?
Well, that's pretty cool. Susie Cato was a lovely person, and when I was right at the beginning of wanting to be a writer, this is probably 20 years ago, I was looking after my two children. I did a role swap with my wife, who's a teacher, and just for a couple of years. And we watched Susie on television. So that's amazing to think that 20 years later, I get to know her through the book industry and through the children's music industry. So that's pretty crazy. And both my children are surprised that that's what has happened. So that's remarkable. And I hope that Susie will watch this broadcast. So hi, Susie, if you're watching. So I'm sure she will be.
And I hope you get a role one day too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure she'll be keen to be on your show. So isn't it amazing how things can work out? And we're lucky in New Zealand that we're a small country and we can meet different people from different walks of life, people who do unusual jobs. I've been very fortunate in my career to meet and phone and have video chats with all sorts of people who I may have known of, and now I get to speak with them. So it's great. Yeah.
Now, you have told me privately in the past that you don't get as much recognition as you like from the public, and you were telling me how you have a lot of you're very humbled that people like me would want to interview you. Now, do you think that people are too scared to reach out, and how would you encourage them to do it
I think
forward?
one reason for that is, and this is worldwide, children's authors generally, the books are read by young children and their families. So, and this would be the same for myself. The books that I read as a child, or that were read to me, we didn't generally relate the books with the author. So Roald Dahl was a name on a book, but I never would have known what he looked like as a child. And probably not until I was an adult did I actually see what he looked like. But ultimately, it didn't really matter. I'd spent some time in his mind or his imagination. He'd shared his imagination with millions of children. So I think that's the nature of what we do. It's quite different. If you were an All Black or a sports person, people would interview you and talk about you. What are your interests? What are your hobbies? What are the foods that you like? Because we want to know all these sorts of different things. But I think it's a little different with children's books and children's authors, that the public are more interested in the words or the imagination more so than who the person is. And that's fine, because that's how I looked at children's books when I was a child. So that's just a different type of job. But here's one benefit. We can do a very public job where a lot of people see what we do, but we can then disappear into privacy, and that's lovely, so you can be meeting people, and if you never discuss what you do as a job, no one would ever ask. So there are some big benefits to being private. Yeah.
Now, this has already been recorded, but you've got a special event coming up, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to advertise it. So as of this recording, we are 7 days away from it. So if it's not up by then, if you're watching this, it'll be up by then.
Yeah.
So tell us how that came about and what people can expect from that interview.
Okay, so that is with Waipa District Libraries, and Dee Atkinson has been lovely. Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've sent Dee some of my videos. I make music videos for some of the books that I've produced, for children's books. And Dee's been very kind, and she has shared those videos. And the other connection is when I was a young boy, my uncle has a farm, a cattle and sheep farm. And our family used to stay on the farm quite all of the school holidays. So, like, it would add up to some portion of months per year, and we would help him on his farm. And so many of those experiences have ended up in my children's books, and not only books sold in New Zealand, in different countries. So I've been very fortunate to have a mixed experience of living in an urban city and then also living in a rural farm setting. So with Waipa District Libraries, that covers Waikato areas and in particular Te Awamutu, where I spent some time. So it's been great to have a connection from my childhood that also connects with what I'm now doing as an adult. So yeah, that's been good. So that's coming up. I think it's on the 17th of March. That will be an internet recorded interview, but it will be broadcast live. So yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah.
And if this video comes out after that, I'm sure you can find somewhere to watch it.
Exactly. Yeah. It'll be well advertised on social media. Yeah.
Now, yeah, from what I understand, you've also had some connection to Rhys Darby over the years.
Yeah, that's correct. So I've been lucky that working with Scholastic Books, they are a huge global brand. I mean, of course, when you say Scholastic New Zealand, you think the Wonky Donkey. That is at one stage was the largest selling book in the world. I think that was a couple of years ago. So I've been fortunate to meet Craig Smith. He's a lovely guy who's the author of that book and the musician, writer of the song. And as well as working with Susie Cato, I've been able to work with Jay Lagaya, who is a New Zealand legend and Australian legend in entertainment. He's featured in the Star Wars movies. And I've got my little Star Wars book here. It's quite cool. I don't know if you can see it on camera. But that book there was one of the first books that I read in terms of reading by myself. So this is the original copy from 1978. It's still going. And it was remarkable to think I've ended up working with Jay Lagaya, who's one of the feature actors in the prequel movies that came out about 15 years ago. So he's a lovely guy. We worked together. And I ended up working, providing the lyrics for Jay to record the music. So we have a CD here, which comes with the book. So that was a cool thing. And the other thing with Scholastic was they were producing a series by Rhys Darby called Buttons McGinty. And I think Rhys describes that as his Indiana Jones meets his own childhood. So I was invited to be part of the editorial team at Scholastic, and I was offering guidance on what I thought would be a good direction for the series to go with. And I've also managed to include myself in the book. And this is what they call in the movie industry an Easter egg. So for anyone who is reading The Adventures of Buttons McGinty, the first one, on page 161, I'm in the book. I put myself in here. There's a comment there, for Pete's sake. Who is Pete anyway? Well, this is me. This is Pete me. So that is something that I'm confident that no one knows until this video. Okay, so anyone watching your video can read this book and go to page 161 and they will know who the Pete is. It was me. So yeah, that was a great experience. So I didn't ever meet Rhys Darby. He's a busy guy, but I have communicated with him through obviously through a series of emails and sharing information. So that was something the one thing I really enjoyed the most was Rhys Darby is hugely influenced by Monty Python, the British comedy series from the 70s and 60s. And so was I. And it felt, if anything, like it was revisiting that style of humor, crazy, off-the-wall, wordplay jokes, bizarre, random references. So that's one of the only times ever in my career as a writer where I've been allowed to really embrace Monty Python style creativity in terms of it being part of a job. I could never go to an office job and say to the boss, hey boss, I've got some great Monty Python references here. How about we integrate this into our workflow? It would never happen. So I was absolutely thrilled that Scholastic asked me to be part of the production team with that. Yeah.
This is a little off topic, but
sure.
Do you reckon that Flight of the Conchords that he went on to do and became so famous for, along with the other two gentlemen that were in it with him?
Yeah.
Rick McKenzie and the other guy who
Jermaine.
his name forgets me.
Yeah, Jermaine.
Jermaine. Do you think a lot of that comes from the Monty Python? Because
Yep.
looking back, there seemed to be a lot of Monty Python inspiration.
Absolutely. If you look at the ages of everyone involved, it's around my age. And we're talking people in their 40s, late 40s, early 50s. I'm probably a little bit older than them, just by a bit. But that was the in New Zealand, when we were growing up, when we were teenagers, there was very limited entertainment. It was I had black and white television, one channel. I mean, my kids would go crazy if I said, you've got one channel, it's in black and white, enjoy it. So what kept us alive was movies on the big screen, and that was at that time Star Wars, James Bond, and Monty Python were some of the biggest influences. And even Peter Jackson, I've read his autobiography, he's referenced that, how hard it was to get entertainment on a global scale. And when you got it, you would watch it and you'd go and see the movie over and over. So I absolutely would say that Flight of the Conchords was influenced in part by Monty Python, for sure. Yeah.
Do you think he would watch them and say, right, I can make a New Zealand equivalent to that 20 years from now?
I don't think any of us were thinking that. I think that what happens is we develop a sense
in his mind, in Reese's mind.
Yeah, I'd say no. I'd say that we watched that and we said, that is our style of humor, and that is very English, if you like. It's quite different to American humor. And I think, so all of us watching those movies in the 70s and the 80s, we're learning how to laugh and how to make our friends laugh. So I think what they are doing is just a continuation of making themselves laugh and making their friends laugh. So look, when I wanted to be a writer, it wasn't really till I was an adult. There was never in New Zealand any chance until Peter Jackson came along of us doing awesome entertainment jobs. There was no chance. So it's been remarkable that a tiny country like this, you can, if you're a teenager now, it's realistic for you to be a writer, to be a comedian, to work in Hollywood movies. That was unheard of. All we had was Fred Dagg. He was the funniest guy in New Zealand. One guy, Fred Dagg. And there was no chance of being involved in entertaining jobs where your comedy or your sense of humor got paid for.
Now, there's so many other celebrities that have broken into writing, not only Reese.
Yep.
A really, really good example is David Williams.
Yes.
The British judge from Britain's Got Talent.
Yep.
And comedian.
Yep.
Now, unfortunately, and I say this with the utmost respect, his comedy career kind of flopped. But when he was deciding how to reinvent himself, who ever thought that he would become a really well-known children's writer?
I know, and everyone now goes, of course, but at the time they were surprised. And he himself has gone on record as saying he wasn't certain if it would work, and he was concerned that people would say, this isn't good enough. You know, so I guess he gets some credit for taking that chance. I don't think the publishers expected it would end up like this. He's arguably like the Beatles or ABBA or Michael Jackson in terms of, I can't think of a more famous children's author. Can you? I can't think of a more famous individual known for writing children's books other than J.K. Rowling. But there was no guarantees because it could have not worked. And there are some examples where it hasn't worked. We may have mentioned this before. Miranda, who I'm a huge fan of, I love her TV series. It's just brilliant. But her children's books did not take off for a multitude of different reasons. So it may not have worked. And if it had not worked, that would have been a hard pill for him to swallow. So good for him. Yeah.
Yes, and you brought it up. Speaking of Easter eggs, this is the second time we filmed this interview. Sadly. But anyway. So you were talking about how Miranda didn't work out. And in an interview with John Campbell on Breakfast TVNZ during the pandemic,
Yep.
Mr. Williams has said that he was basically told, as you mentioned, by a lot of writers that, oh no, your career's going to flop for a second time.
Yes, yeah.
And he said that was the hardest thing to hear, because
Wow.
his career was already flopped once and he was worried that it would flop again. So,
Interesting.
were you ever worried that something similar would happen to you, that nobody would like your writing and your career would sort of, I guess, flop as well?
Yes, I was. Yes. And I've said this in other interviews. The hardest time for me was the global financial crisis. And this was around about 2010, 2011, 2012. It's amazing how the world's moved on and we've almost never discussed it anymore. But that was the hardest time for me and all writers, because what was happening was publishers were going out of business. They were closing down. Up to half a dozen publishers in New Zealand closed. And what really was said at the time was that is the end of people writing fiction for a career. They were saying that the public would now move to ebooks. They would move to the internet, social media, and the whole idea of someone producing a book with 140 pages, spending thousands of dollars. This is companies producing paper books, was over. So that was very, very confusing for me, because that's quite a bit of bad news to be delivered. And the one thing which I'm glad that I did was I didn't actually believe that was the case in the genre that I worked in. And that was stories read by children at bedtime. I had my own two children who were younger at that stage. And I saw how important that was, that I didn't believe that my kids would go to bed reading ebooks on a tablet or whatever. I thought, no, they'll be reading a printed book. And as long as the book is well written, there'll still be a desire for it. So that's one bet that I got right. I didn't agree with people who said that printed books were gone. In some ways, that has happened in some different genres. It has been very, very difficult for writers of adult fiction in certain genres. But for children's, I never believed that. So that was the only time ever where I was very concerned the career that I had chosen would fail. And that's the hardest test I've ever had. I've never seen anything as difficult as that again. Thank goodness. So, yeah.
Well, at the time of this recording, we are going through quite a large, well, at least in your area anyway.
Yeah.
Not so large in other parts of the country, but a large outbreak of the current strain of the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah.
So how has that been on your writing?
Okay, so that I still rate the global financial crisis as more difficult to experience. This is hard. The main reason it's hard is we are unable to leave our houses essentially for months at a time. As a writer, that doesn't stop me writing. That's one thing I want to make really clear. So that's a big difference. No one is saying, hey, why bother writing? No one's saying that at all. But not being able to leave the house for 4 months at a time, and still in Auckland, because we've had 5 separate lockdowns, and the most draconian lockdowns by worldwide standards as well, we haven't been able to communicate in person with bookshops, libraries, schools, principals, or teachers. So that has meant for a couple of years we've been disconnected from our readers and our parents who take children to see our readings. So that has been quite difficult, and particularly difficult for people living in Auckland, as it has been even more severe for people living in London, Los Angeles, Melbourne. They've been even more affected. So, but I think the thing which gives us hope, this is a temporary situation. This will not always be like this. So all we can do as writers is continue to be very productive writing and patiently wait for the time when we can reconnect in person with our audiences. So yeah, we just have to be very, very patient.
As we record this, we are turning a corner in terms of borders opening.
Yep.
We're under a new traffic light restriction system that still enables us to leave the house, go to restaurants, go to movie theatres, etc., etc.
That's
so
right.
under that new traffic light restriction system, have you been able to, with the help of the vaccine passes, been able to do your book signings at a restricted?
No, that's still that is still not possible. There are a number of reasons for that, but particularly in New Zealand, the children, the vaccination program for the children is still in its beginning processes. So I realistically don't think in all of 2022 that we will be doing any events that involve groups of children or in schools. In Auckland, if you live in Auckland, I think it won't be until 2023 that we will be permitted to do that. So it may be different in the South Island. There may be parts of the South Island that have been not given the same challenges. But for Aucklanders, it'll be the whole year. We will not be doing any live events involving groups of children. Yeah, and that's okay. We're prepared for it. And really, the heroes of these times are the school teachers. My wife's a teacher. They go into school every day not knowing what they're going to face, and it's very stressful for early childhood education centres. So I'm not worried about me. I'm more worried about the burden on and the challenges for teachers and their students. That's much harder to deal with than what we have to face.
Right, and so with the foreigners being allowed back very soon at the time of this recording, do you not even think that'll be beneficial to you guys having children coming in on holiday? Because some of their vaccine programs are very far much longer than ours.
Yeah, no,
that could sort of be a lifeline for you guys in that respect.
No. Our regular activities are with the local schools and the school communities and the parent groups. So that really is that is what we do. That is our career. So that's on hold for at least a year. People coming from overseas that sort of carry on wouldn't have any impact on what I do at all. Yeah,
it's a real shame because that could be a real sort of lifeline for you.
Well, in terms of speaking with overseas, you've raised a thought that I've had, is that the one good thing with what we're doing now with technology is I can actually communicate with families overseas and children overseas through Skype, through Zoom. So I think that's more what I'll be aiming to do, would be rather than, live events are out, I will then look at the creativity. I can make videos or I can do live events using the computer systems and the internet. So I think that's the answer. If there are other authors wondering what they should be doing, I would highly suggest that what we're doing is a good way to do it. Let's do visual online connection. So that's the temporary answer. Yeah, that's the answer.
And I guess this will be the last question on this segment before we move on. Sure. But I guess the saddest part about the type of work that you do is you'll be one of the last entertainment industries to be able to have a crowd, as you might say, yes. Because there will be sporting events, concerts, and the like that will be operating well before the end of the year, I would imagine.
Yes.
As we are about to hit the peak of this Omicron.
Yeah. You're right.
Within the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks, at the time of this recording, we will be able to hopefully go to concerts, go to sporting matches and the like. And it's really a shame that little, industries like you get left out until much later on, because you cater for the younger audience.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That is true. But I've just looked at the glass being half full. I've never written so much new content ever in my career as in the last 6 months. I would have 10 different children's stories backed up in the system, which I've never had. I normally have 1 or 2. So really, I've just tried to make the best of the situation, and it is going to pass. It's temporary. So, in 5 years' time, this will be part of New Zealand or world history, which we'll put in the history books and learn from it. So, but thankfully, it's not not permanent, so that's the good thing. So, yeah.
Now, next time on the agenda, you have not only written your own books, but you have, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, you've collaborated with, other books as well.
Yeah.
And you were involved in a combined book that got featured again on Susie Cato's YouTube channel. And she chose to read your story out of that big collection of.
Yeah, I know. Lucky me. That was the Kiwi Go marching one by one.
Yeah, and I think there were about 5 to 10 stories in that book. So.
Yeah, I was so pleased when I didn't know Susie was doing that. It came up on my timeline. Susie Cato reads a new music story from the latest Scholastic collection, and the moment she started speaking, I thought, hey, I recognise those words. So I'm very grateful for Susie for doing that. And if you're watching, Susie, thank you again. That was a lovely surprise. I love surprises. I had no idea that she would read that, and so yeah, that was great. And that's a lovely book. It's a big, thick, heavy book with plenty of good content in there. So that's all about collaboration. And also thank you to Scholastic. You know, they're a very, very large company that does a lot of things and they involve a lot of people. So it's been very good for me to work with Scholastic during the course of my career.
Now, we were talking about the creator of Wonky Donkey earlier, right?
Yeah.
And so his Wonky Donkey story became quite rechristened or reborn or blew up again and had to be reprinted during the pandemic.
Yes.
And it went viral thanks to someone in Scotland reading it.
That's right, Scottish Granny. Yeah.
Yeah. And so have you had a similar variant of one of your books that it went out of fashion and then something happened where it caused it to blow up again and you had to get it reprinted? And if you have, or even if you haven't, how hard is it to get a book republished if it's been in the wayside for a while and then it suddenly blows up again, as you might put it, and people decide, oh, I like that, I'll go get a copy?
Yeah, I have had one, but not at the scale of Craig. And mind you, I can't think of any author in history other than Craig who's had that experience where you are the world's largest selling book for a book that was really a 10-year-old book that was sitting on shelves doing okay to becoming number one with a bullet. So in my situation, nothing near that level. But I did write a book quite a long time ago about a female soccer player, Alex, the super soccer striker. And the charm of that story was she referred to her name as Alex, and her name on the team sheet was Alex. But she was a girl, and she was the only girl on an all-guys soccer team, if you like. So that story was published quietly and to no great fanfare. That would have been 2013, was that 9 years ago? And then I was thrilled a couple of years ago to get an email to say that the American Library Network has really, really liked the story, and they've decided to pick it up and make this story part of the American curriculum in their schools, which again doesn't make the news, but was a significant development for me. So probably the largest selling book I've ever produced is a book that many New Zealanders may never have heard of, Alex, the Super Soccer Striker. So that is a case of an older book that I had forgotten about getting a new life. And I don't know the reasons particularly why that really caught on, but it just came out of the blue. I was absolutely floored when I got that email. So a lot of the work that I do is not necessarily stuff that people see on a day-to-day basis. And it does happen. Here's the one thing I can say to you, Blake, that I can absolutely recommend to anybody involved in writing. Make sure you have the movie rights or the TV rights to your stories. And that's fairly straightforward for an author to do. When you sign a contract, you have the ability to say to the publisher, I'm happy to deal with you on the print book side of thing or the ebook, that's fine. But if a movie is made, I want to be in control of that. So I've had one company contact me for the Boy Zero series. It was a film producer in the UK. And I've had initial inquiries. That was a few years ago, but it was a good reminder to me that when the movie companies express interest in adapting children's books, the author needs to have as many of those rights as possible. And I think for me, the most obvious example is Shrek. Shrek is a 32-page children's picture book issued in 1991, I think it was. It's an okay book. I'm a pretty honest person. I don't think it was that good. But I tell you what, Shrek the movie with Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy is epic. So that can happen out of nowhere to any of us. And Craig's example is the most extreme that I've ever seen, where he became world famous just for the book. And something like Shrek, most people have never read the book, but the movie is epic. So Craig's in an unusual position. If they ever made a movie of the Wonky Donkey, then he's going to get famous twice, once from the book and once from the movie. So writing kids' books can have anything as possible. It's an amazing industry to be part of, yeah.
And I hope if you end up watching this, Craig, you're not doing better.
Yeah, hi Craig. Hi Craig. You might get to interview him one day.
If you're watching, I would love to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You never know. You might get to interview Craig and Susie. So we should keep going at this rate. You know, I don't know David Wellham, so maybe not him.
Maybe we can do a big collaboration call in the future.
Maybe.
Finally, you've actually got to dabble in, and you were just showing me this morning at the time of this recording. You've got to dabble in some other ventures, not just books.
Exactly, and you've got two really good Easter eggs. You've got two exclusives in this video. You've got the exclusive of my Easter egg in Rhys Darby's book, and then the other Easter egg you've got, which I've told no one at any stage, is right at the beginning of my career, and this was from the year 2000 to the year 2005. That's when I had to really go from nothing to trying to make it work. I had no guarantees it would work. So I did everything else that I could do. I sold chicken food for some company. I don't even know what that was. I was on a call center. I worked on a help desk. And a good friend of mine, Belinda, who is a librarian, or used to be at the time, she had contacts in TV New Zealand or in the production centres. And she said, why don't you put your name down as an extra? Because when you're not writing a story or when you're not doing a call centre, if you're available that day, you could go onto a TV or a movie set and just stand there and do nothing. And I thought, okay, well, that's fair enough. They pay you to stand there and do nothing. But it was more involved than that. So Shortland Street is a very, they shoot a lot of content. They're on every day. You know, they shoot hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of content. So when I offered to be a background guy just standing there doing nothing, on a couple of occasions, they said, hey, look, can you put on a gown and can we put you in the scene and can you do some acting? And so I've sent you the video clip. I'm never going to share that. And that's for your eyes only. I'm never going to share that with my people who follow me on social media. But you'll see some clips there where I was involved. I was working with Dr. Chris Warner. I got to meet some really cool people. And quite often, out of the blue, they'll just say, here are some lines. Do this. We'll give you 10 minutes to rehearse. That's one advantage of being a writer, because my whole life is about writing lines and of dialogue. So I was really well prepared for that. So I think it's funny in hindsight that I ever did it. I think it's a little embarrassing. But, you know, it's an interesting thing to have on my CV. So, yes, people would have seen me on Shortland Street and would have had no idea. Quite often I was wearing a mask. Good training for these days. So you can watch those videos and make your own opinion on what I did. I had a lot of fun doing it. But I never continued it once the writing succeeded. That was it. Close the door. Never again. Well, never say never.
Did you... just a quick side thing here. Did you know that Michael Galvin would become the legend that he is today back then?
No, I watched the first episode of Shortland Street when it came on. I think it was 1993, that far back. We all as a nation watched it, and he's still going. Good for him. So I don't think he would have expected to be doing this in the year 2022. He's like the Ken Barlow of Coronation Street, the New Zealand version, except he's a lot younger.
And again, I don't know where this is going to go, so if anyone from Shortland Street is watching, hello. But he's a phenomenal actor, and I'm not just saying that to be polite.
Yeah.
But I enjoy critiquing actors and singers and so forth.
Right.
He is really good. I am really surprised that he didn't go further into the States and to Europe, because
Yeah.
he is probably one of the most underrated, and you would know this as a writer probably. I don't know if you ever written for a TV show or anything, but writing for someone that talented and not getting a bigger break is absolutely extraordinary. He's
Yeah.
probably one of the most underrated talents we've got in this country.
If you look at some of the other cast members who began on that show, they've gone on to have established Hollywood careers. Martin Henderson comes to mind. So, yeah, I agree with you. He's underrated, but I suppose he must feel incredibly satisfied that he's worked full time in the arts and entertainment career uninterrupted. And, I think that is a massive achievement. That's like being a professional sports person, but still being at the top of your game in your, I don't know what age he is, maybe my age. It's remarkable to go that long. So I think that he would still feel very satisfied that he's done a full-time career uninterrupted. Not many people can say that. So, yeah.
Right, but at the same time, it's a crying shame that he didn't go further.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
Mm. But anyway, is there any message that you want to, before we wrap up here, any message you want to give to your followers or fans about going through this pandemic and what it meant to you? Or
Yeah, I think that it's a sign that New Zealand is a caring country. I think that there's been some negative news recently, but overall, in the 2-year period, my experience of this pandemic has been walking down local streets, saying hello to people, neighbours, and seeing neighbourhood communities supporting each other. I've seen a lot of that. When the pandemic first struck, it reminded me of my own childhood. I mean, New Zealand in the weekends, there was no shops open. There were kids riding bikes, people playing cricket at the end of a no-exit street, and neighbours bringing food across to each other. Well, we didn't have so much personal contact, but it reminded me a lot more of what New Zealand used to be like. And the New Zealand that I grew up in, people didn't go to Bali for a weekend or, Disneyland for 10 days. We didn't do that. We just stayed locally and spent time at home during the summer holidays, spent time at the beach. So in some ways, I think it's reminded New Zealanders of what a great country it is to be in, that you don't have to go overseas to live the big life or to have excitement. There's a lot we can do in New Zealand. So I've seen the benefits of this experience, seems to me, to have made communities more connected. That's my impression of what has gone on. And the recent negativity is a shame, because it doesn't reflect what has been the New Zealand experience. And we've managed it as best as we can. I haven't agreed with everything the decisions that have been made, but overall, we've come out of this as best as we could do health-wise, and we're in a good position to learn from this and be prepared, because there will be other events like this that happen. I mean, I won't go off on a big divergent, but one of my research job was going to England to research the Anzac puppy, to see where the New Zealand soldiers were stationed in Staffordshire in the UK, West Midlands, and to see the amount of graves there for the New Zealand soldiers who died from the Spanish flu pandemic. And many of them arrived on the ships. They arrived to England and they died on arrival. And to see the impact, 50 million people died, and people still talk about it now. So I think with modern technology and a caring communities, we've handled this better perhaps than other pandemics in history. And I hope that we can learn from this to handle them better again. We're prepared for this. And I think, as I say, it's ground us down to focus on what matters the most. What matters the most is your family and your community. And that's been a good thing, a good reminder for us. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on today to share your stories and some of your memories of your career. It's been a real pleasure to have you on today, Peter.
Oh, I'm so pleased you asked me. Thank you, Blake.
And to the viewers, we'll say see you later. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell and we will see you on the next episode of the BFG Podcast.